Well, hello everybody, and I'm so delighted to be here. It's been a long time since I've been on the community call or at Life itself. So for people who've never met me, and actually probably most of you, because these are all new faces for me, I'm Sylvie Barbier, and I'm one of the co-founder of Life itself. I'm half Taiwanese and half French. And as Nathan said before, I'm a performance artist. Like art has always been my love, and it's always been the lenses in which I understand the world. And I want to say a little bit about myself and how I got into this quest in wanting to talk about the second Renaissance. I imagine that if you're here, you're probably quite like me, which is you want to understand the world. You know, parts of you want to understand what goes on in the world. And for me, that first started because I'm half French and half Taiwanese. And at 4 years old, I arrived in France from Taiwan. And I ended up feeling like I didn't belong. I neither belong in Taiwan, nor did I belong to France. So I tried to find belonging in all of humanity. So what was common in all of humanity? And this quest of trying to find what was common to all of us, what was human nature, led me to obviously also want to understand the world we're in. And this quest of wanting to understand the world we're in started with, as a young artist, really wanted to understand the art world and the art market. Because if I wanted to be an artist, I wanted to make it as an artist. And I was looking at first the effect of globalization on the art market, and that artists became like brands, you know, like Louis Vuitton. You buy this artist and you put it up, and that was just very bizarre for me as a young artist to watch that. And there was other things that seems very bizarre in the art world, like that maybe people bought art without really appreciating and were speculating on it. And it just seems really complex. And there was a loss maybe of the authenticity and unicity. And this kind of quest left me often really overwhelmed and bewildered with the quantity of information that was going on. And I noticed that a group of people might deal with the world and its complexity by just being like, oh, everything's okay, you know, let's just keep going as it is. Climate change, bah, we had an ice age before, it's not going to be that bad. And it just seems like the way they dealt with all this change was just putting their head down, which, you know, fair enough, because it's really hard to make sense of all of that. And then there would be maybe other groups of people who, like me, wanted to understand this complexity and this world we were in. But often the explanation were very simplistic, very, very short. Like, it's if we have those problems, it's those capitalists, it's those bankers, or it's like, it's those politicians, they're just all corrupt, or people are uneducated, or it's men and patriarchy. You know, it was very simplified story. I was like, well, I just felt like it was too short of a story. And it seems often that these things would interact with one another. And I was, and I as, sorry, sometimes my English bugs a bit. And as I looked, there was also some other noise that would come in the back, and some noise that sounded like very hopeful about technology and how digital tech could solve it all. And that felt really inspiring for me, because in my Chinese name is Shi Wei, and Shi in Chinese means hope. So I'm someone who is very hopeful. And I would start participating in those groups. But gradually, as I participated in those groups, it just seems that we just created a kind of like other version of the old world. You know, the way you have iPhone, and iPhone was a really new thing, and now we have iPhone 12. iPhone 12 is not really new. It's just like a little tweak of the old. And it just seems that in those groups that claim to create something new, to be able to resolve the problem, we're just doing some slight variation of the old. And it led me to really wonder, why was that? Why was it that we were incapable of really coming up with something really new? What were the illusions that held us back? What were the mindset that had us just either react from the past or repeat the same thing? And therefore, I had to start to first look at myself, because that's when you look in yourself, you can find the whole world in your heart too. And for example, I had to inquire about my blind spots. And so what were the blind spots that we collectively held for so long? And I think these were many core value systems that modernity held. And we are children of modernity. I grew up in the 90s with those films of like, people would like get rich at the end of the film and, get on the beach and drink a pina colada and throw money at it. And that was happiness. I grew up with this myth. And how that show up in my life, for example, is like, I like going on Amazon and buying lots of like 10 euros or 20 euros thing. And before you know it, like I spend quite a bit of money. And why do I do that? Because I've lived in this kind of viewpoint that by buying things, I'll get happier. And that's, for example, one water I swim in. But there was also other water, like this water had also a different taste, which is, for example, I saw that I really grew up in the myth of equality. In France, in the school, it's called liberté, égalité, fraternité. And so égalité means equality. And that's a beautiful dream to have had. It's true that in the eyes of God, ultimately, we are all equal. But there were also, reality wasn't so. Some people are born poor. Some people are born, they have to deal with more traumas in life. Some people are smarter than others. Some people are more artistic than others. We're not equal. Life does not give us all the same card. And yet we're trying to pretend that we live equally. And that leads to a lot of suffering. I think for me, one of also greatest illusion behind all of that was also an illusion of the I, of individuality, especially in the West. I grew up in France. It's like my father would tell me, Sylvie, you're unique. And that would give me such a sense of pride. Oh, yes, I'm unique. Like there's only one like you. And it was wonderful to give me that sense that I was really special. But with that also came, with that sense of maybe uniqueness, came a sense of being separate, of being different. And we tend to also in modernity separate things, like, and there was good reason why we did that. We separate religion, politics, and arts. But that separation is not true. So like I had to start to do this work of like understanding where did I come from, that I was a child of modernity, that was given. I was born and I landed into this world, into this view, and I didn't never get to choose. And it just became clear that obviously if we weren't aware as a collective of these views, it would never be possible for us to create truly a new future. And that currently the old world is like this beautiful pictures that is starting to crumble. We had this beautiful painting that we really believed in, but it's starting to rust a bit and fade away. And our sense of reality is decomposing, and we're freaking out a little bit because we were very attached to that painting. And it became also gradually clear that in order for us to create something truly new, first, we had to have a correct diagnosis. What is modernity currently dying of? Because if we don't have the correct diagnosis and yet we're the children of modernity, that means we hold the same genetics, we hold the same DNA. We might die of the same thing or just produce another V 2022.5 version of modernity. Or similarly, we are going to be in reaction. And I like to use the metaphor of, is as if your father or your grandfather is dying, and we know he's dying, and it's very important that we take our time to understand the story of our ancestors, because that's also where we come from. But also in death, it's very important to be able to get complete and mourn. And so there's one part that I would say it's maybe the rational part, doing a good analysis. And then there's the second part, which is also the emotional part, the artistic part, which is able to emotionally process that we're going through the end of an era. And without these two dimensions, it's very hard for us to really create something new. And what I'm really excited about is that I think we're living what I call the second Renaissance. Similarly, like the first Renaissance appeared in a great moment of crisis. It was the midst of the Middle Age. It was the late Middle Age, and right before there was the Black Death. And it was a moment of transition where an old world was coming to an end, something new was appearing. And at that time, they did not know that this new thing was called modernity. And it was that great moment of transition. And I think we are also currently living through this great moment of death and rebirth. Something is dying. In like most moment of great transition, we are to let go of something to be able to give birth to something new. And so that this new future is not haunted with the ghost of the past. And and that's an exciting time. It's a moment of crisis, and it's a moment of life. It's an exciting time to see this birth coming. And I'm also fascinated in understanding of what's going to be the color of this new world. Because sometimes if we still wear the glasses of modernity of the old world, we can't pick on the right seeds that are blooming, or we live into, it's just the end, sometime at the end of March, if you like walking in nature, you see trees that look completely dead because there's no leaf, they're totally dry. But actually inside, they're full of life. They're just about to bloom. And I think we're living in this moment where we're actually in the midst of this winter. And it's important to understand that yet in the winter, it's also full of life, and life is about to emerge. And what's going to be the shape of that leaf? What's going to be its color? How big are those leaves going to be? And I'm also really fascinated in this process of both letting go of modernity. Is really also important to start creating a new future, a truly new future. And by that, I mean a new vision for humanity, not just a variation of modernity that we might see with post-modernity. Also, there's some discussion about meta-modernity. All these things are still held in modernity, which is part of that transformation process. And so what will come after that? And that new view, in my sense, has to be a completely new view of what it means to be a human being. Not just, a tweak around capitalism, around sharing and stuff like that, but really what it means to be a human being. And that it both is able to let go of parts of the past, but also integrate it and transcend it, go beyond our ancestor. We stand on the shoulder of our ancestors today, but we can see higher. But to be able to see higher, our roots needs to be well grounded in the earth. And some of the key elements of maybe when I really look at that tiny bud that is starting to bloom, is that I have a sense that this second renaissance, some of its dimension is being able to hold complexity. You know, we do live in a very complex world, and it's difficult to be able to hold that complexity. And by that, that implies us being able to hold multiple perspectives. I think that's something that is starting to emerge, you know, that people have different perspective. But within that, it's also being able to find the order in them. So there's multiple perspective, but it's not like just putting them all flat on the same line, you know? It's being able to find their home the way, you know, when I love, because we have one of our collaborators, Valerie, who I believe is here, she says, oh, in the kitchen, you know, the tenzo is the person who finds the order. And I think one key thing is being able to hold complexity, see the multiple perspective, and find the orders, find where things belong. And another dimension, I would say, is to integrate the individual and the collective. And that's what and by that, I love using the term interbeingness. I think that's the ultimate way of explaining is that we have our individuality and yet we belong to a collective, and how to hold that together, you know, without feeling oppressed by the collective or without running away from the collective and trying to being disengaged, you know, oh, I'm doing my thing on my own corner, you know. And that is, I believe, a greater embrace of reality. And so basically currently the work I'm doing is doing a lot of empirical observation of the world, you know, just look, all the answers are right here. And then also trying to capture the sign of the second renaissance, but constantly looking, oh, is it the second renaissance coming, or is it more of the old world, you know? Is it more of the old world trying to repeat itself? And I'd love to kind of open the floor to also hear a little bit about you, like where have you in your life, in your circles, heard maybe first, you know, oversimplified narrative of an explanation of the world, you know? I'd love to hear first, if you'd love, like, yeah, I'd love to hear, you know, where are your antennas hearing?
Thank you so much, Sylvie. That was yeah, fantastic. I really love the analogy with the tree and the buds coming to life. And also to add to that, I don't know if everyone knows, but actually the buds burst after the last hard frost. So there's always that final hardness that happens before they bloom into life. So I think it was such a beautiful analogy. Yeah, and I will open the floor. Who's ready to share? Someone's gonna go first. Yes, Alex.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you so much for that. I'm also in the process of writing a book, and everything you said was completely aligned. I couldn't have anything to argue with that. Those perspectives are all, I think, beautifully expressed. Partial solutions. Yeah, I got to, you know, want to put a section of that in my book. So it's the technology ones are the most common. You know,
Yeah.
techno optimism comes up a lot, and AI, if it doesn't destroy us, it will save us. Yeah. This is, you know, it's one or the other. The political narratives, right? You know, we need progressive policies that will be the solution. I see people, well, you know, I know of a person that is wanting to, or probably by now has created an app that will encourage people, particularly young people, to meditate more, because that's the solution. I was chatting with a woman the other day, very interesting woman, actually. She's also writing, everyone's writing a books, which I think is really interesting. I mean, maybe it's just the different people I'm speaking to now, but I'm sure more books are being published now than for a long time. And a lot of them in this space, maybe taking different perspectives, maybe not as holistically as what you're trying to do. So this woman's perspective is, it all went wrong from religion, and religion, specifically the dysfunctional elements of religion, not spirituality, but the church saying you must obey the rules that I laid out. So that's her perspective, and she's writing a book about that. What else?
Great.
Given time, I can probably come up with more, but there's a lot.
Thank you so much. I'd love to hear if Carolyn, because I know, Carolyn, you also put your hand up, if there's some that you'd like to add to the mix.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks for a really interesting and inspiring talk, Sylvie. And yeah, it sort of all resonates very much with me. To answer your question around simplified narratives, what immediately came to mind was all the COVID stuff. And the kind of the polarization between, on the one hand, the people who thought, the government are out to get us, and it's all made up, and for God's sake, don't go and get vaccinated and all that kind of stuff. And on the other hand, people who were going 100% for what we were being told in the media, the government, etc. And it's very all or nothing, both sides. Yes. And I'm very struck in the last years, even before COVID, in the lack of nuance. Yeah. In how in the different positions, so the oversimplification of very complex areas that, for many reasons, including, I think, the internet, social media, all that kind of stuff, others end up being completely polarized, and there's no nuance, and you just have a bunch of people shouting at each other and not listening.
Yes.
And how do we find the middle way like that, which is, yeah, I think, yeah. So that was what I was struck by, with your question.
Well, thank you so much for sharing what you just said, because I think also the opportunity when a birth is about to come is that it demands you to grow. It requires us to grow in our humanity, in our capacity to understand, to see wisely, to see truly. And just a day ago, I said with a friend, it's like, life is not about trying to not have problems. You're always going to have problems, but it's having a problem worthy of you. And I think life is throwing us a very big problem, really worthy of our humanity. And it's indeed like, how do you find the nuance? How do you find the listening? How do you recreate dialogue? Or maybe that dialogue was never there in the first place. So thank you so much for this input. I have also other prompt question that I'd love to hear from people. Was also kind of because I'd love to also hear a bit more about what you guys feel in the space. But I actually went a little bit fast in the presentation because I got nervous, and I forgot to also share that some of the key chapters that will be in the book. The book will be basically in 3 parts. The first part, I will give a lot of context about my life. Why I will do that is because I think sometimes understanding intellectually is something, but insight is very different. And so that an explanation about the world, in the book, I try to always mix an explanation about the world with a personal story, because it's an insight. It's not just rationally understanding something. And some of the things that I really got to see is that I wrote a post called in part of the post is in a secular world, the ego is God. And we killed God, and we've outsourced our humanity to technology and AI. So that touches a little bit what you mentioned, Alex, like, we're going to be saved by tech, oh, maybe it will kill us, but it's not too bad because we're just a virus, or like, AI is going to be so much smarter or wiser than us. That's outsourcing our humanity. It's denying that, we are like human beings, are living beings, that are divine too. The individualism, I've talked a little bit, the illusionary ideology of separation. And also with that comes the ideology of freedom. Like for me, one of the greatest discovery was not, I grew up in the ideology of the freedom to have. You go in the supermarket, and that's the ultimate expression of the ideology of freedom to have. You can choose to buy 20 different types of ketchup, and one of those ketchup is going to make you happy, is the ketchup for you. And actually, once I went to the Sahara, and in that culture, what I discovered was the freedom to be. And that's very new. That was very new for me to discover that we have a freedom to be. And the freedom to be is actually more important and greater than the freedom to have. Because I don't know for you, but often it's very difficult to feel that you can just be yourself in any realm. I also talk about the failure of the multicultural republic, because having grown up in France, I really grew up with this ideology of that you're white, you're Asian, you're Arab, you're Black, you're all children of the world, and we are together, our France, and we're gonna all live together, and it's gonna be happy clappy. And having grown up in those multicultural banlieue suburbs of Paris, I saw parts of that beautiful dream, but I also saw the failure of that dream, where it didn't work. And that in a way, what is very, I think, delicate is that we love dreams, but the dreams that are the most powerful are the ones that are grounded in reality, not in an illusionary view of human being or of the world, because that leads to actually great catastrophe that we, for example, saw, with the horror that communism had brought. There's a reason why we end up capitalism, like the failure of communism was horrible. And also communism and capitalism were both like brothers, both children of modernity, because they both had a materialistic view of human beings. So maybe capitalism as the capitalistic child won, but it's important to sometimes we have this kind of nostalgia of the past, but it's important to know that communism was also a child of materialism, and actually many communist regimes also destroyed nature because they had this view of being able to exploit nature. I could go on, and I will go on. And then I talk about the death of truth, which I call postmodernity, the rebellious teenager of modernity, which we moved from I think, therefore I am, to I feel, therefore I am. And both of these are still in the illusion of the I, that there is an I that is separate. And and as you say, why I go a little bit in these things is that these imply a lot of subtlety. You know, they have a lot, like also in the diagnosis is important to have a lot of subtlety and nuance about what brought us to where we are. And also to, you know, in a way, when someone dies, to also acknowledge all the wonders that it has brought us, that I am so grateful that I am living in this era, regardless of its challenge, that I live as a woman today in France. I am free to vote. You know, I am no longer scared of dying in childbirth. I am no longer gonna give maybe birth to several children, and many of them die in early childhood. Like this, just I remember when I was a child, we had this thing of like, you know, no more children dying of hunger. That was extraordinary. And we had like, now there might be a reverse at the moment due to the crisis we're going under, but that was extraordinary. That was never heard of in humanity. And I think in being able to mourn and deal with the past, it's important to acknowledge what our ancestor gave to us and to have also gratitude for this gift. And so I'd love to hear, my second question is now, what are you, both two question in one is like, what do you want to let go of modernity for you personally? And what are you grateful about modernity?
Okay, I'm happy to share first. I think what I would like to let go of is probably also sometimes taking that, like perhaps unconsciously, but that segregation, or like being of one ideal and finding it hard to be fully open to others. I think that's something that's so conditioned, and yeah, it's challenging to get over that conditioning, to be like, okay, I can have this idea and accept others, and we don't have to agree, but we can still live together in harmony with those ideas. I think particularly, you know, things like, so for me personally, I'm a very strict vegan, and sometimes when I'm challenged by other people who come from their ego and kind of, you know, come up with silly arguments to try and challenge my beliefs, it's very hard not to meet them where they're at, you know. And I think that's something that comes from, yeah, from modernity, is this conditioning of being like, I'm right, you're wrong, or like, this is me and this is my idea, and what you're saying doesn't have a space in my kind of field. But what I'm grateful for, I mean, I don't know, this one I'm both grateful for and also sometimes frustrated by, but like the creation of technology and, you know, the fact that, you know, oil is like such a thing that I both love and hate, because our society is built on oil. Like, we've created something so special and unique, which is so powerful and connects us. And, you know, we have like medical facilities which are built from oil, and yet it's also the one thing that has destroyed nature the most. So I was talking the other day about like plastics, and, you know, there's barely a thing, like a material thing that we have which isn't created from some sort of plastic. And so, you know, I think we sometimes take for granted all of these things, and we're both, you know, holding the view of like, oh, well, we need to stop using oil because it's partly because of this, so we're destroying the planet. And yet we have it all the time, and it's always in our clothes, in our phones, and everything around us. So I'm also grateful for oil.
What do you believe is behind the view? What do you believe is the view behind us using oil?
The view behind it.
Yes, because oil was there probably before human beings were there, right? But us consuming it the way we do, using it the way we do, there's a view behind that has us act this way. What do you believe might be that view?
Mm, well, I think the view is that maybe they was put on the planet for us and us alone. I
Mm,
think maybe that's what you're getting at. It's like, you know, we can extract it because it was placed here for us. This special magic fluid which just lives in the earth it's so good that it must be for us, right? You know.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And there's Jan Rune and then Diane.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're touching on what I wanted to comment. The pervasive individual and cultural self-deception that where we have limits and we need constraints, and that's part of caring, that we can't consume us. If we like, we're in a position that we can deceive ourselves in so many ways. So, and that speaks to the need for this kind of community that you're a part of, so we can step away from our self-deceptions and care for the lack of a better word, appropriate things. And I think that's what we need more of.
Thank you. It's Juan or Jan?
It's, yeah,
Jan. Thank you, Jan.
thank you.
And so, yeah, like, so just to recap, the question was, what is it that you want to let go of from modernity, and what are you grateful for in modernity? Diane?
Thank you. Yeah, Dion. I can respond, to that question, and also what you said about what view would be or is behind our use of oil. And it's kind of related, they're all related questions, I guess. But I would maybe even challenge the question a bit and say that we have a tendency to want to find reasons for things that are mental, or that they're based in mental models. But I see it as just a biological drive to exploit readily available resources that you will find in any organism. If you put gallons of ice cream out in the forest, organisms will eat it until they die of it. They are not, and that's how I see humans with the supply of oil. We are not necessarily rationalizing our use of it. We are just completing our genetic code. But so in that kind of flows just a thought I had during the presentation about essentially humans' tendency to categorize, simplify, or encapsulate what we observe in the world, just to simplify that complexity. I see it as, our brains are not maybe designed to hold the complexity, so we have to simplify it and divide and conquer. And I think it's important to recognize that's been a very effective strategy in many ways. But of course, it breaks down when you are failing to comprehend, the interrelatedness of ecosystem actors. For example, you're missing critical relationships. So maybe back to your question, is what I want to let go of is that, of that rationalization, or thinking that we can think our way out of these problems. I mean, of course, it's critical to be thinking through these things, but also recognizing that we have design constraints. Our brain has design constraints that we need to be very aware of.
And so what is it that you would like to let go?
For me, thinking that I can hold all of this information and this understanding in my own head, and that I can memorize a method. I've talked in other meetings about using, externalizing our thinking through the use of various tools, just because I think that's necessary in this time in human history. That, as an example, our working memory is just so limited that we, as I said, cannot hold the complexity in our own brains, that we've not to promote technology more than it should be, but I think it plays a critical role in helping us comprehend, what in terms of dashboards or, collecting data on an ecosystem will become just absolutely critical. So I want to let go of that, of the belief that we can just talk about it and memorize a method, that acknowledging our biological constraints or physiological constraints.
I think you're really on the money on something, which is there is no solutions.
Mm-hmm.
There is no problem. Problems are constructed from our minds. No, there's there's this happening, but understanding the happening, you can't love something if you don't understand it. Now, you might not always be able to fully understand it, and I think you're like that's been also something for me in writing this book, of like, because it's intellectually demanding, and it can be so satisfying to be like, "Ooh, I think I understood the problem. Ooh, I think I got the solution." And should be like, well, understanding it, even comprehending it, does not mean at all that I'm capable of doing it. I'd love to be able to play the piano. I understand conceptually how to play the piano. It does not mean I'm at all capable of doing it. I do think that because how the Western mind, the modern mind grew, is a mind that really wants to understand before it can take action. It's like it's a mind that is like, unless I understand, I'm not willing to do it. It's a culture that functions a bit like that. And the thing is, I don't know what exactly will emerge out of modernity, after modernity. Something is definitely going to emerge, right? Something is going to emerge now. And I think that similarly, for this to emerge, for me, it's really a similar process of becoming a mother or giving birth to something. It's going to demand something out of you. It's going to demand of you to grow, to let go of things. So when I see whatever this thing is coming up is really requiring me to let go and of so many, and mourning, like really dealing with like losing that dream I grew up with, that also the dream of like that understanding was it, that we were so smart, we human race, like all these things. And it's difficult. It's like a little death, many little deaths. And but each death also, what I think a renaissance is possible, because also individually and I think collectively, I've seen little renaissance. I've seen our capacity to grow in being able to listen, our desire to want to bring forth, to love the earth, to love one another. So I also really have a lot of faith. And it's not in order to like save humanity, save human race, one day the earth will die and the sun will die. But it's more like, well, while we're alive, we have this one shot. We have this one shot at growing and really getting and exploring what are we made of. you know, like, what are we made of human being? What are we capable of in the great sense, you know? And I think that's the game. That's a game, like, or at least I think it's a more fun game to play, the game of like, I want to see what I'm made of in terms of how I can grow in my wisdom, in my humanity, in my understanding, in my experience. And no mud, no lotus. And hell, we have a lot of mud, but that means we have a lot of lotus to come. And I'd love to give Helen a shot at sharing.
Okay, now I'm going to try and deal with 4 questions at once.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I really hear what you're saying. And I find it, you know, you think what's good about modernity? This is good what's about modernity, the ability to communicate and the opportunity to communicate across all levels, you know, that transcends the, you know, the blasé interactions you can have at times. But also I wonder, as I listen, because I hear something different coming out of younger people. Okay, I'm in the ebbing of my life. You know, no need to play guitar or anything about that. It's just the way it is. And I think differently. And when, you know, I smiled when you said, it's, you know, I mourn for the life I could have had or that you promised me, because can you imagine when you're born in the 50s, you have a whole different view of what life can present. And essentially the last, you know, 10, 15, 20 years have been trying to adjust to that. And not lose hope as a human being, not even in the greater scenario of the state of the world, but, you know, the purpose of my life, to try and distill something from it that makes it count.
Yes.
But you know, you're talking about polarities and Renaissance, and I am slowly asking myself with these questions, not, as you say, to find a solution, but could I believe and let go and trust enough that something else could intervene in this situation? And I'm really not talking about alien spaceships, religious people, gurus solving the problem, but is there something else that could have a third vector approach here? That doesn't have to be just a slight variation, or, you know, you learn that, you know, the brain can evolve cellular structures, DNA changes. We don't know what kind of a human we may be dealing with in another couple of generations, what people are born into the world, you know, what my next door kids understand about the world that was nothing like I ever understood. People are being born into a new paradigm, really. And I don't know what they're going to create. We seem to be in some kind of an interim where we're kind of throwing all the toys out and saying, what can we do with this? Is there anything salvageable with what we've got? And yet we know the greatest salvage is the human race, us as people, as spiritual entities. So it's kind of like living with the agony and the ecstasy of what the outcome could be. I may not live to see it, but some people here will.
Yes. I think it's so beautiful what you just said of like living with the agony and the ecstasy. You know, I think right there you've summarized, which is one have to remember why I call this time what is to come like a second Renaissance. Was the first Renaissance was like that. People forget. They go to Florence, they see these beautiful paintings. They forget it was a real troubled time. They forgot that the second Renaissance was not an easy birth, and that in the Renaissance, in the first Renaissance, it had components of the medieval age, and it had components of what was to come to be modernity. And we right now are living in that moment of like life and death all coming together, and there's a bit of both, and it's all mixed up, and it's hard to distinguish what is what. And
but you see,
agony
if you think of the artists there, right? Instead of painting a painting that was flat, they started to get dimension and perspective into their paintings. So something was being released that afforded humans to be able to see something that previously hadn't seen before, like the invention of the wheel. Yeah. So we've kind of come, and we're getting to the zenith of what we're post-industrial revolution. Maybe are we getting to the zenith of what technology can give us? And then what's left?
Well, these are great questions that you have, because it's really, that's why I say it's really important to be like, oh, is what is coming another version of modernity, or is it really something new? Like, or maybe it has a bit of those both components put together. My personal view, and I'm not saying it's the truth, but I am someone who's driven in wanting to find the truth. Like, not like there are many truths, and they hold into like the truth, And I think things that are in the realm of like technology is still in the realm of the old modernity world. Tech's gonna save us, as Alex said it very well. Techno-solutionism. It's wanting to find a shortcut, and not wanting to do the hard work. And it's a hard work to meet our humanity. And we have to have a lot of compassion for ourselves, and as a group, as a human race. Because I think when people struggle to look or connect, is often because there's been also a trauma, something that cuts us to be able to connect to life, to the living force. And how to grow muscle. Part of growing muscle is that you break them a little bit and they grow, and you break them a little bit and they grow. But if you strain it too much, you tear the muscle. I think similarly, for us to grow, each time there's a bit of a break, for it to grow. And so it heals, it breaks, it heals a bit, and then it grows. And so similarly, for us to grow as a human race, we got to do a lot of healing, can't grow without healing.
I have another question I want to pose, because I think I want to reel it back to, some of the fundamentals of life itself is not only gaining these insights, but also the practical action that comes with it. So I wanted to maybe first propose to you, Sylvie, like with these insights that you're gaining, how do you integrate those into your daily life?
Well, everyday life is an opportunity for practice. If you pay, Valérie, who's here, our food expert, but like you can look at every dimension of your life and use them as an opportunity. How do I eat? What do I eat? Why do I eat what I eat? What do I buy? Why do I buy? Why do I buy what I buy? How do I speak? Why do I speak? Every time, oh, that's how I speak to my kid. That's how I am to, like, everything is an opportunity to practice. Now, are you willing to look? Are you willing to look? Because sometime when you look, at first, there might be a moment where you really don't like what you see. And then there's suffering that's going to arise. But if you can ride through that wave, then a lotus comes. And also accepting. I think one key thing is like you might realize, oh, we want to go towards that direction, but get that you're not there, and you might never get there. And it's totally okay. It's not a problem that we are where we are. You know, it's the and that does not mean resignation. There's this real fine line between acceptance and resignation. And you can know in yourself if you're saying you accept, but actually it's a hidden resignation. You can look in your heart. You know if it's actually giving up or is actually truly acceptance. Because if you accept, then there's still a stand. You're still standing for something. If you resign, you lost your stand. Yeah, in my personal life, having become a mother has been a huge practice, because it's required me to really transform a lot of the things I receive from my ancestors, and really inquire about why I am the way I am. You know, what do I want to honor and let go of? And seeing that I'm transmitting things to my child that maybe I don't want to transmit, but I still transmit. And seeing that I've been able to transmit things that I do want to transmit. And he's my Zen master, because he's a mirror. He's a very, very unfiltered mirror. And so I have a lot of like a short feedback loop on how where I'm falling on my face, and where I might have some wind points, and understand that there's nowhere to get as a mother. He will have his challenges. He will need his rocks that he will transform into diamonds. I cannot protect him, but I can only try to equip him the best at my capability for his life. And I can tell there's a lot of tears that has a lot of tears. But you even if you don't have a kid, you can do that, as I say, about what you eat, about you know, how you have love, relate, everything, how you work, everything can be an opportunity for practice, just if you want to. I will also drop a link if you guys want to stay informed about the second Renaissance. If you want to stay informed about material or other talks, or when the book comes out, please just click on the link and drop your email, and I'll keep you updated. And maybe a last question, or I don't know, maybe we're at time, so it's up to you, Nathan.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to ask you, like, what's your timeline for the book so far? Do you have an idea with that?
I don't have yet a timeline. I'm I think 6-9 months, you know, like that would be great. 6 to 9 months. I need to, yes.
Amazing.
This was the first offer to the outside world of some of the content and intention.
Well, I feel honored that we were the first, so thank you so much for coming and sharing it here.
Thank
Does
you.
anyone have any final comments or anything they'd like to share before we come to a close?
Just wanted to ask, are these kind of gatherings, do they happen often?
So they're happening on a bi-weekly basis at the moment. So actually we don't know who is going to be joining next. I'll be probably figuring that out next week. But we always encourage people from the community, as I already said, to come in and share their insights, and also hold a presentation or a discussion as you wish. But yeah, so the best way to stay up to date with that is either through the Life Itself newsletter or through our WhatsApp chat.
And if you wanted to find out about the community, how would you do that?
You can go onto our homepage, so lifeitself.org, and on the front page you'll see there's a place to sign up for the newsletter, and then just below that there's a place to sign up for the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many people are in the community? Is it like spread around the world, or is it localized?
Mostly in Europe and the US at the moment. It's kind of hard to define what the community is, I would say. I think regularly people that engage here, we have between maybe 10 and 15, but the community is much broader. We have a lot of engagement also in the chat, and yeah, there's many links to life itself, which kind of weaves in people that come by every now and again.
So it's quite a fluid thing.
Yes, I'd say so.
Yeah. Thank you. I know you need to finish off, but you know, it's kind of all new to me.
Yes, of course. No, it's great to share and to reiterate to everyone else as well. So thank you for asking. Yeah, so let's close. Thank you so much, Sylvie.
Thank you, everybody, for this wonderful evening. I wish you a wonderful continuation into this journey of being a human being.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvie. That was really lovely.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.